It's fall of 2002 and you're living in rural Pennsylvania. People are still going about their lives and watching the news from their living rooms while the world tries to explain the strange lights appearing in the sky. Then you look across a cornfield and see a crop circle cut into the land with a level of precision that doesn't make any sense. Now, when most people talk about signs, they think of a movie about faith, grief, and a family trying to hold itself together after a death in the family, which to be fair, that is the case. But when I watch Signs, I see a movie where one family gets more information than almost anybody else on Earth and nearly wastes it by staying at home. So today we're going to break this down from the ground level of Bucks County, with the Hess family as your main case study because they're the ones sitting closest to the warning signs. And if you've never watched the movie, don't you worry about it. I'm going to walk you through everything. Now, to figure out when you had to leave, we need to follow the people who had the clearest view of what was happening before anyone else did. That takes us down to the Hess farm, because on the afternoon before the invasion, the family sat down and held a vote. They had two options, stay or leave. They voted to stay, and that's what today's episode comes down to. Because by then, they weren't just choosing between leaving or staying. The crop sign was already in the field, the ships were already moving into position, and the only useful weakness anybody knew about got voted out of that room. We'll touch more on that later. So, we're gonna walk through the days leading up to the vote, figure out what they actually knew at each step of the way, and find out when leaving was still the best call. Because by the time the night was over, the house had bought them time, but that choice only worked because of a crazy amount of luck. Before we get into your escape windows, we need to talk about how this invasion works, because the movie Signs runs on a different clock from almost everything else I've done in my When You Had to Leave series. Signs gives you several days of warning signs, but it doesn't give you several days of collapse. You don't get weeks of hospitals filling, roads clogging, and official statements falling apart in public view. Instead, you get strange clues scattered across a few days, and then the actual survival events squeezed down into one night. That timing is what makes this movie interesting for this format. The lights still work, the roads still exist, and the people are still watching the news from their living rooms while the actual landing sites have already been marked. So what does leaving mean for this movie exactly? At first, it only means getting away from the marked area before darkness falls. You don't fully know the destination yet, and that's part of the problem. Early on, leaving gains you distance. Later, once the missing pieces finally show up, it gives that movement a direction to head towards. Alright guys, let's get into our escape windows. The first window opens before anyone knows what the crop circles actually are. And this is the window that most people will miss, by the way. At this point in the movie, nobody's talking about alien landing coordinates yet, about the water, and nobody has a reason to think that staying on the farm could be dangerous. So the first visible clue is the crop circle. Graham finds it cut into his cornfield, with the stalks bent but not broken, and the local police officer tells him similar circles have been showing up all around the world. That is strange, but it doesn't give you enough reason to pack up your bags and leave. Then the animals start acting weird. One of the dogs on Hess farm turns violent and Morgan has to put it down. After that, they start picking up weird noises on the baby monitor. And then Graham sees something on the roof. It could have been anything though, but he goes out to try and find it and comes up empty-handed. Your mind isn't immediately going to go to alien invasion. So if you left during this window, you'd be leaving before most people had a reason to believe anything was actually coming. The roads are still clear, the county is open, and the farm still looks like a farm. You might feel uneasy, sure, but you don't have enough information to turn that feeling into a practical decision. And that's why most people would stay during this window. A crop circle, a weird dog incident, a strange sound on the baby monitor, and the figure on the roof. Individually, all those things could make you nervous, but none of them tell you what you're running from or where you're running to. Okay, window 2. The second window opens when Bo turns on the TV and every channel is talking about the same story. Unidentified crafts are hovering over Mexico City, and both the US and Mexican governments say they don't belong to them. This is the moment the hoax explanation starts falling apart, because global crop circles are being reported in numbers that make this bigger than one farm getting pranked. And when every TV in Bucks County is showing the same thing, most people finally start to accept that something serious might be happening. So movement during this window is still possible. The roads are open, the stores are still operating, and towns still look functional enough to make people think there's time to gather supplies and wait for better instructions. During this window, Graham goes to the pharmacy to get asthma medicine for Morgan. While Graham was doing that, Morgan decided to go read up on a book on aliens. A little later, some pretty crazy footage from Brazil comes in. A man filming his son's birthday party catches one of the aliens walking through an alley in broad daylight, and the news confirms this footage is genuine. At that point, the threat isn't only lights in the sky or shapes in a field anymore, it's now moving through the neighborhoods. Now, leaving during this window makes more sense than it did earlier, but there's still a major problem. You don't have a destination. Distance from a farm still helps, but without the missing piece Graham is about to get, you're leaving with the right instincts and no clear direction. And that afternoon, Graham gets a phone call from a character named Ray Reddy. Alright, window 3, this is where the situation changes. Ray is sitting in his car in his driveway when Graham arrives. And Ray isn't just some random nobody either. He's the man who accidentally killed Graham's wife. So when Graham pulls into the driveway, there's already been half a year of grief and anger sitting between them before Ray ever says a word about the aliens. He's bleeding from a wound, clearly frightened, and not planning to go back inside his house. He's already figured out what he needed to know. He looked at the crop circle patterns and noticed something specific. None of the marked sites were near water. So if the marks were targeting coordinates and the water was absent from any one of them, the obvious conclusion was that the water was an issue for them. Basically, he thinks the water affects them in some kind of negative way. Then he tells them not to go toward the pantry. There's one of them in there, trapped behind the door, and Ray is not sticking around to deal with it. Graham should have left right there. Instead, he goes inside Ray's house and tests the warning for himself. He slides a kitchen knife under the pantry door to probe for the shape of whatever is inside, and a clawed hand comes through the gap and swipes at him. Graham cuts off the alien's fingers and gets out. He now knows there's a hostile alien in his county, and the neighbor who had it trapped in the pantry believed enough in the water theory to leave immediately. When Graham gets home, the news is reporting 274 cities with alien craft hovering over them within a mile of crop signs, and it's expected to reach 400 within the hour. Morgan has already worked out the implication. The farm is within a mile of a landing zone. Graham calls a meeting, and they vote against heading toward the water, which is crazy because here's what everyone at the table already knows in that moment. There's a crop circle in the cornfield, a confirmed hostile alien in Ray's pantry a short drive away. The invasion is imminent, and the one specific piece of information about how to hurt these things came from the man who had one trapped, studied the pattern, and is currently driving towards a lake. So to vote against it is a pretty wild decision. Okay, so window 4. By the time boarding up begins, leaving and heading towards water in any useful sense is way behind them. It's getting dark out, with alien ships positioned over 274 cities, and the roads outside are unknown territory in the opening hours of a global invasion. You could still get in the car though, but leaving now means guessing your way toward the water in the dark while the invasion begins around you. And this is where deciding to stay home and wait comes to collect its toll. The family still has a house, but they no longer have a clean departure. They still have a plan, but it's a plan built around covering openings well, the enemy is already arriving. They haven't become powerless, but they have traded the ability to leave for a rush defensive checklist. The house stays intact through the first assault. The boards and doors hold, and for a few minutes, the house gives them evidence that they probably made the right choice. Until they spot the attic door. Nobody covered it, so the family retreats to the basement while the aliens enter from above, and the shelter they trusted immediately shrinks down to one room. But the aliens don't only hammer the entrance, they look for another way in. Sure enough, they find the coal chute. One of them reaches through, grabs Morgan, and starts dragging him toward the opening before Marilyn and Graham pull him back. They don't kill it, or seal the chute in any meaningful way. They only manage to get Morgan away from it, and that struggle triggers his asthma. So now they're trapped in a basement, with the door barricaded, the coal chute still compromised, and Morgan struggling to breathe without his medication. Shortly after, he manages to fall asleep, and then they turn on a radio they had in the basement. Apparently this is what's going on. Families are being poisoned by a toxic gas that the aliens secrete through their bodies, and people are being dragged away. A lot of people died. By the morning, the radio reports the aliens have left. Something scared them away. They departed in a hurry, leaving their wounded behind. It turns out 3 small cities in the Middle East found a primitive method to defeat them, and whatever it was, it ended the invasion. But when the family comes upstairs, the same alien Graham encountered in Ray's pantry is now inside their house. The alien takes Morgan hostage and sprays him with toxic gas, but Morgan's lungs were already locked up from the asthma attack. Bo had also spent the entire film leaving glasses of water throughout the house. Those glasses became the only weapon in the house that worked. Merrill found them during the fight, and the same all-or-nothing swing that ended his baseball career became what he needed to smash the water into the alien until it died. That sequence is why the ending can't be treated like a real survival plan. Because Morgan's asthma, the glasses of water left behind by Bo, and Merrill's swing all had to line up inside the same room at the same time. A normal family in that basement on a farm during an invasion doesn't get to count those pieces being perfectly arranged for them. It's just extremely unlikely. Alright, so the answer itself is pretty clear. The best window to leave was right after Graham came back from Ray's. Before the vote, before boarding up started, and before daylight disappeared. At that point, he had the information about the water. That being said, the interesting part about signs is that they got more useful information than almost anyone else on Earth. and they still end up staying at the house. Which is funny because Graham does listen to Ray's warning despite their history. He even confirms there's a hostile alien in the pantry. So the failure here is that he has the information, accepts it, and still lets his family talk him into staying in the house. One thing science adds to my When You Had to Leave series is that the right window can close even after someone in the group recognizes it. Sometimes the problem isn't seeing the answer. Sometimes it's holding the line when the answer asks everyone else to leave the only place they still want to believe is safe. That's why the ending works for this movie, but not as a real survival plan. Like I said earlier, Morgan's asthma, Bo's water glass, and Meryl's badass swing all had to land in the same room at the same time. It's a beautiful ending, but it's extremely unlikely for all those things to line up for somebody. And out of curiosity, if you guys were voting to stay or leave, what would you do? Would you have gone to the lake or would you have stayed home? I really want to know. I'm always curious about this kind of thing. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and YouTube thinks you'll like this video. If you've already seen it, I've got a playlist of a lot more just like it over on my main channel. This is not my main channel. It's my second channel. A lot of people don't know that, so feel free to go check that out. Cheers guys.